As we begin the daily race at Spa-Francorchamps, we find myself in the Scuderia Supra starting in P1, with the Blackdale Supra P2, a red and white Skyline P3, the Mercedes of the classic livery, of the default livery I suppose, as we cycle through the rest of the drivers through the grid, as we wait for the race to get underway. So we go 3, 2, 1, and we're off racing. Everyone trying to get through. The cars at the back, they had to go through the chicane at the end. They're falling off massively as P3 goes for a look at the inside but pulls out of it the last second, which opens up the Mercedes from behind, but he goes with the back of them there, which kind of ruins his overtaking opportunity. As you see in the background there, he slides back in as they come down the hill. Everyone comes down the hill relatively cleanly to Eau Rouge and Raidillon. P1 and P2 already starting to pull away as P3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 are battling for position. As we come down this straight, you'll see the Mercedes trying to dip to the left as the Nissan goes defensive, holding into 5th gear as it's quicker than going down into 6th gear, which he does now, but that's because he had draft and it's enough to keep him in position. As we watch October Moon as the 4 cars go 2 wide, 2 across as they go through, as the Mercedes gets ahead of Audi here, but Audi on the inside line will just have to outbrake him here, which he does, and also gives him a hit for good measure, which essentially secures him P3. This battling essentially lets me and the other Mercedes pull away, as you can see at the bottom right, already coming down the hill, going under the Circuit de Spa sign, as the car's going wild, coming out the exit of the corner with no name, as all the cars start to transition through P1. The Skyline has gotten back ahead of Haoyu 31, followed by October Moon, Japanese name, Tony, and Mr. K. Mr. K with a half-second penalty. As we see an Aston Martin, an FT1, and coming up the rear, Pirate Racing in P16. Started about the 12th place, that fella, so I'm assuming he's had a big accident. As we transition back to the front, we see myself coming onto the back straight as I run wide and go into the dirty stuff, which allows 339 to go for an unchallenged overtake on myself, and I just have to do nothing but let him pass, because there's nothing I can do, unfortunately. As we come through the left kink, with Aldi not too far behind, considering lap 1's now over, we've pulled out quite a small gap on them, as the Mercedes right behind still probably looking for that P3. As we finish the first lap, you see myself secure a much better line, which allows me to get on the exit a lot better, allowing me to really close the gap here. By close the gap, I mean not let him pull away, obviously, because I'm not going to overtake him here. As we go into turn 1, about 1 second clear of Aldi, as he takes a much sharper line into the corner, which compromises his exit by the looks of it. As we transition through the cars coming through turn 1, as we watch P6 down the hill, probably the car on the whole grid having the best opportunity for an overtake right now, as he'll have the straight line speed to overtake October Moon after the Kemmel Straight. Pretty solid line. As you see at the bottom right corner, you see myself going for the overtake on 339 as we go 2 wide into the next one after the Kemmel Straight. As the Nissan Skyline also goes for a take on Haoyu. Everything going on here. As you see us going 2 wide at the bottom right. I'm ahead for the moment. Do I hold on to it? No, I don't. He's on the inside right there. As we go forward, as we transition to the replay of the overtake here from third-person camera, we see myself on the driving line, whereas 339's gone defensive here. Brake at the right time, just before the 100 meter board, allowed me to get a nice line, and they're thinking he was going to come up the inside there. I left him space. He pulled out of it, so I didn't need to, but I left him open for him, which allowed him to come through, as he has a bit of a moment coming around the right-hander here. As we get the onboard camera again, as you can see, I'm looking for him, as I led him through on the inside here, knowing full well he was going to go for that move anyway. As we go 2 wide through the right-hander, as we come into the left-hander, I make sure I kept in mind that I need to get the power here to hold the position here, which slows us down even more, which brings everybody back into contention for the race win here, as the Mercedes, the Skyline, and the other Skyline right up behind us now is P6 of the Supra. The last of the Supras in the top 6, all closing the gap. Under pressure now, I need to go defensive into the right-hander here, keeping the Skyline behind just for a bit longer, as we come down the right-hander with the Skyline breathing right up behind me as we transition to his onboard view, right on the cusp of an overtake there, but just nowhere to go, unfortunately, and he's just got to pray that he has a moment, as the current P5 October Moon has a moment coming out with that right-hander, compromises exit onto the back straight. As we look from the third-person view, him right behind myself, and 339 just pulling a tiny gap on us right at the moment, giving a bit of breathing space, as it's a train of cars all the way down into P6 at the moment. Very close racing, as one of the skylines of October Moon goes a bit wide there, as we come to the final braking zone. Aldi going and setting up the inside. Luckily I see him, because that was not a move I was expecting. As we go around the final corner, and that move on me just made me lose about another half second on 339. With Aldi getting the fastest lap, P6 getting the fastest lap, as Aldi comes up the inside of us here, gets a very tight line, very compromised exit, keeps it tight, which allows me to get on the power sooner than he does, as we now drag down to a Rouge, as my Supra engine just outperforms all the cars in this weekly race, which is why it has been the most dominant. As we look over the hill, we see P1 has probably got a 1.5 second gap at this moment. Never really know in VR. So as we transition to the spectator cam, we see him just sitting in my draft, and as you see at the bottom right, my point of view, just gone defensive, gone to the back to the driving line at the end. As we come to the braking zone, braking as late as possible whilst maintaining the line, keeping it in third gear, as we go through the first technical section of the track, with P4, 5 and 6 still right behind. One mistake will allow anyone and everyone to get past us. As we watch on board for P3, and on the bottom right we still have myself there, we see how close and how limited this race is when you're trying to make an overtake, as there's no real overtaking opportunities, even in a better handling car such as the Skyline. It's still unfortunately no real opportunity to make an overtake on this track unless you get a mega line through Eau Rouge and the Supra messes up through the dirty air, or just messing up the line and having to lift off, or getting a half-second penalty, which at the start of the week was very common, but now we're at the point in the week where there's just no real chance of getting penalties. And if you do get penalties, odds are, as we look up the back of the track here, P16's gone off there. Self-inflicted, because he's about 15-20 seconds behind P15. Not doing a very good job representing the Australian drivers there, as P6 and P15 are taken up by the Australian drivers. As we come onto the back straight with someone with a half-second penalty, as you can see, he's now going to lose that P5 position, and he's going to give Hao-Yu a nice bit of breathing space, which will allow Hao-Yu and Aldi to actually focus on catching up to myself and 339. It looked like October Moon actually had a big enough gap to stay in front there, as they're actually now under threat from P7. Looks like they're having a good few running corners here. As we get to the end of the third lap, as we look on board at the bottom right, we see me starting my fourth lap now, with P5 and 6 coming out the exit. So we are still very close, as that driver in P10 I think it is a very squirrely exit. As we see myself take a very different line to everyone else through turn 1, as we come down the straight for the fourth time this race, heading down Eau Rouge and Raidillon. Once again, getting considerably closer to 339, just starting to get back in the slipstream of his car, but not being affected too badly by the dirty air, as we watch all the cars come through, still quite close together through Eau Rouge, as P9 is probably the last of the cars part of that group, as P10, 11 and further on are just kind of having a race of their own at the moment, just getting a bit of practice on. As we watch cars come down the Kemmel Straight, we watch P12, Emafdi, looking like he's got an opportunity to catch up to P11 Kuro as he comes down to turn 4. Thought he would have been close enough to make a move here, but the Aston had just enough to stay in front for now as they come through the first part of the technical part of the track. As we scroll forward to P8, the Mitsubishi, no, that's the Skyline, the orange Skyline with squirrely just moments before. As we zoom forward to Aldi with P4 right behind him, with P5 and P6 just dropping off slightly. There if something goes wrong, but as we transition back to myself going through P1, slowly catching up to 339, not quite in a threatening position at the moment. Actually, you see my shape my head at the bottom right, the fatigue of wearing VR2 all day. This is probably about the 5th race of the day at this point, and I'm absolutely knackered as 339 gets a bit wild here. Once again goes a bit more crazy, which just allows me to reel in a little bit more here as we get even closer on the exit here. Unfortunately, with the dirty air, it makes me lose a bit of speed, not getting a tight enough line, made me slow down a fair bit, but with the downforce and the slipstream, I'm now catching him up and will close the gap and be probably half a second behind by the time we get to the bus stop chicane. As you see a bit further back, P3 and P4 miles away from us now. There are no threat of having to defend from them. As we come to the braking zone, as myself getting really close here, getting a real tight line as P3 goes deep, and the Mercedes trying to counteract that. You see an almost overtake happen there. But it looks like the Skyline had him covered quite well as we start lap 5. Coming into turn 1, we can see how different lines we take here and how much of a better run I get compared to him. As he takes a normal line, whereas I take a much sharper line, which allows me to open up the wheel a little bit quicker than he can and get on the power much sooner, which is crucial for this overtake that I do make on this lap, I think. As I'm right behind him, as long as I nail Eau Rouge and Radion here without the lift off, which I do manage to do, as you can see at the bottom right, I am right behind him, really closing the gap at this moment. As he goes defensive for the next corner, I choose to go around the outside on the driving line. As we reach the braking zone, I think at this point I don't, as there's contact between him and I, if you might have seen that at the bottom right then, which allows me to keep the place for another lap unfortunately, but I'll transition quickly back to my point of view. As you can see, I've gone for the move into the braking zone, left him plenty of space, and just furiously hits me like Alonso and Hamilton did last year actually, when you think about it. Same kind of move. What's it, just how to drive first and in a fast car, whatever he said. As we come down the hill, a little bit rattled by that, lost my line a little bit. No damage between either of the cars, which is good. I wasn't overly frustrated when this happened, but obviously I was a bit miffed that he probably seen myself flashing my lights there, really thinking, you know, come on mate, you shouldn't have done that. You've lost the position and you've hit me to keep it. As Audi now closing out without skirmish just then, it's allowed Audi and Hauyu to close on up, with October Moon still got his nose in it. P6 and the Supra has just dropped off unfortunately, especially considering we come to the part of the track where the Skyline and the Mercedes are quicker. As we look forward now, we can see how close we actually all are together once again. As we come around the double right-hander on lap 5 of this race, as Audi gets a bit squirrely there, coming onto the back straight, allows him to get closer, but there's just nowhere for him to go, and he just nearly loses it, as you see at the bottom right at the same time. You see me looking in my mirrors, seeing what's happening back there, as it allows Hauyu to really be under threat from October Moon here, as he goes, no, he doesn't go for a move here, which probably would have been a really good opportunity for him, but I don't think there's much of an opportunity really to do anything there, sadly. As we all approach the bus stop chicane for the 5th time, all 6 cars within probably 4 or 5 seconds of each other. The Supra at the back, just part of the gang just by association because he was on screen at the same time, but he's well out of the battle for any position at the moment. As we go down the inside of the turn 1, 339 gone very defensive, myself going very aggressive, as we get a really good exit once again, nailing this corner every lap of this race, which has allowed me to consistently and constantly pull him in. As I give him a little love tap down the straight, as I tell him, get him over mate, come on. As that little bit of acceleration boost kind of made him go lose a bit of control there, as unfortunately that costs him a half-second penalty. Is that really? It's hard to really say is that my fault or not, because my bump came long before Rouge and Radion. You should be able to judge that a bit better, in my opinion. As we go down into this right-hander here, I'm clearly ahead at this point, and I'm able to hold on to position this time without getting bumped off into the corner. As I go defensive, because of a very bad exit through that sector, I hold the defensive line. He runs round the outside of the corner, a little bit too wide unfortunately, unable to get the car steering in due to the negative camber nature of that corner. And he's just getting a bit out of shape here now, which allows Audi in P3 to really catch up here. All Audi has to do right now is hold on to the back of that Supra. He's currently not under pressure from Hauyu or October Moon. As we come down the exit of the most difficult corner of this race weekend, it has to be said, it's been an absolute nightmare to perfect it, and it's still something that catches you out every race just about. As we go through the left-hander here, nailing the exit, short shifting into 3rd, opening the wheel up and getting the power as soon as possible, so that way the back end doesn't kick out. As 339 can't really get back his momentum, not used to having the dirty air in his face, is now about to serve his half-second penalty, which allows Audi to move up into P2. 339 still having the speed of the Supra, trying to get that top end back is now under pressure from October Moon heading into the bus, which again, as the Mercedes nearly has the moment there as we head into the braking zone for the 6th time this race. P4, P5 and P6 really close. 339 is having a lot of trouble now since he served his penalty. He's fallen back and he's now out of the podium after leading this race for most of the time since Sector 1, Lap 1, Sector 2, Lap 1 unfortunately. As we go down Turn 1 again, nailing the exit once again. It's now my job just to pull away. As you saw me check my mirrors as we see the cars at 7th, 8th and 9th come around the corner. Starting to pull away as cars are not too far behind at this point. I'm going through Eau Rouge and Raidillon now. P12 just coming down the start, coming out Turn 1. There's P12, 13th, 14th. Pretty far back at this point with Pirate Racing having his own race. Posted some interesting lap times of the 250-minute range. As we cycle back to 4th, 5th and 6th, so the 3 cars battle for position here. As we quickly transition back to get the full view of that, because that was just poor management by the cameraman. As they have a bit of a squirrely exit out of Turn 1 at 339, lifting off into Eau Rouge and Raidillon, allowing himself to get a better exit and get behind October Moon, knowing full well he's going to have the straight line speed. As we watch the back of the Skyline as the Supra gets past. Will the P6 Supra also get through? The man who I thought was out of this race moves up into P... does he? As they both push through and P6 has no choice but to yield to October Moon here. As 339 is now back on the charges. How you nearly bins it coming out of the right-hander here as we go down the hill with Aldi and How you still battling for that position that they've been battling each other for the whole race. As 339 October Moon and the P6 Supra just having their own battle now, battling quite heavily to the point where P2 and P3 are starting to have a decent gap on them, which is a very unfortunate race with 339. It was looking very promising for him, but just cracked under pressure. Unfortunate and unnecessary half-second penalty. Whether it's my fault for giving a bump draft as he gets bumped up the back of October Moon coming into the right-hander there. We see the fact that October Moon really wants that position, to be honest. As we continue to watch behind here, seeing those 2 guys really closing up there. Really close, as October Moon has a very, very minor slip of the rear tyres there as we come onto the back straight. With him now getting not a great exit compared to 339, which will allow P6 to have a look at him as well. As P6 goes up the inside, is he close enough? He's going to have a look. He's up the inside, and that is October Moon down into P6 now. Supra just holding on for dear life right there, not having the grip as we saw in my head, as we saw ahead myself in P1, and the P2 and P3 not gone, but still not really a threat at this point. As I'm just starting to take it a little bit easier, trying to just make sure I don't make any mistakes. As all the cars still coming through, P7 and P8 are still not miles behind when you look at it, when you really think about it after about 16 minutes of racing. As Aldi and How You come down into Eau Rouge and Raidillon for the final time this race, is a really interesting dynamic to see who's actually going to win, because How You's only been ahead of him slightly this entire race, and that was at the next sector of the track here before he gets immediately overtaken and pushed out wide. As How You goes on the outside and the preferred line, whereas Aldi's gone defensive here. As Aldi's gone in, gone a little bit deep, allowing How You to get a better line. Still neck and neck, anything can happen here. One small moment will cause, and that's the moment we were talking about right there. All we have to do now is wait for, no, How You has pulled out of that one a little bit unfortunately, as he gives a little bump to Aldi as we come down the hill to the corner with No Name, around the left-hander, as we come down to Pouhon for the final time this race. With these 2 battling, it's allowed myself to just get a comfortable lead. With 339 getting ahead of P5 and P6 after the battling that happened. October Moon pulling out for some reason, I don't know if they had a collision, but it's kind of just neutralised that race there as P2 and P3 come down the hill, and it looks like, as I transition to myself, How You and Aldi have a nice little battle there, as How You, as we transition onto Howdy's onboard camera as his cockpit is in cabin view, we see him get an absolutely fantastic exit out of this corner, and he just goes around the outside. absolutely nails it. Move done before the corner starts, and it's allowed him into P2, a position he's been battling with Audi for the position that they've been battling for the whole race, and he's finally done it on the final lap. He would have been mega impressed with himself there, as we see all the cars coming around this sector of the track for the last time this race. Myself with the fastest lap of a 2:19.6, I get a a Royale, whatever you call it, pole position, fastest lap and a clean race bonus this race. There was one collision, and that's when I got booped off on lap 2, 3, 4 or 5. As we come down to the bus stop chicane, taking it a lot easier this lap. Don't need anything special. Can't beat that 2:19.6 because the tyres are a bit worn. That's how you nails P2. Audi in P3. 339 just started P2, led most of the race, and unfortunately finishes off the podium. With a Japanese driver that was in P6, most of the race was in P5, October Moon down in P6, and the rest of the field coming through, with Kuro holding off the Supra for the whole race, with Mr. K and the Honda NSX closing the gap there at the end. And in P12 Skyline, the FT1 Concept in 13th, in 14th, Baby in the car, and someone going through P1 still is Pirate Racing, who been living his best life this race, as we come to the end of this Grand